What job should marketing get done in a company?
I think the job of marketing is always to represent the business and the products. It's really, really important that it doesn't take too narrow a view. Lots of things that you see about marketing these days, I think, relate mostly to promotion. So if you look at the four P's of marketing, the different aspects of it, positioning, price, etc., are all important aspects of marketing. And some companies, I think, have taken a little bit of a narrow view of what it means and put it into the promotional bracket. I do think we need to kind of take a step back these days and think about the more broader view of marketing and think about what a business stands for, what a product set stands for, what its position in the marketplace should be, how it understands. Because if we don't get these fundamentals right, we're often in a difficult process as we try to roll out different programs, campaigns, etc. So I think the broadest view of marketing is the most important one that an organization can take. And that means being absolutely stellar and brilliant at the basics of marketing. Too much time and attention, in my view, is kind of laid on to elaboration or complexity, whereas really our job is to simplify things, to make it straightforward, to make it understood. If you take copywriting, for example, as a part of that, if you have a clear message and understanding, a clear position, a clear understanding of your marketplace and what it's researched and what it's for, that job becomes a simple one. It can be done with a LAN, it can be done with skill, it can be done with power, but it's really about a simple getting a message across that somebody can understand and react to galvanize, to put something in somebody's mind that can make a difference. So whether it's the business and the brand or the product set, or even the people within it who deliver things as consultants, depending on what your business is. Mine is nearly all B2B, by the way, mostly tech ones. If we get that aspect right, then everything else flows. So simplify, don't make things more complex. I think the job of marketing is to keep things simple. It's so much more difficult than it sounds.
That's Neil Stoneman, Director of Content Performance at the kick-ass B2B marketing agency Velocity Partners, who I've been a huge consumer of their blog ever since I started marketing, where he's worked for the last 16 and a half years. That's more than half of my life. That's crazy. If it's not clear yet, Neil brings with him earned expertise and experiences, and he shares all that in this episode. Before we get back to our conversation, run the intro. Welcome Non-Marketing, a show where we uncover what marketing is. I won't tell you what to think. I'll help you improve how you think about marketing and life. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist by day and a podcast host by night. This episode was recorded on January 17th, 2025. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associated organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional, marketing, or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Why, Neil, do you think we latched onto the promotion piece so much? Is it where marketing started from? That just like that's kind of the thing we think of right away. It's easier. Why do you think that is our crutch for marketers?
I think it's often the part where it maybe has the lowest barrier to entry to some degree. So if you think about the aspects of marketing that most people understand, what's most visible to people in the outside world, if you like, it's the promotional parts that hit you. It's the promotional parts that you will experience. It's the promotional parts that you grow up understanding. Therefore, most people assume or think that's what the role in the job is. So when you're not from a marketing background or you haven't been trained maybe classically, you'll bring that with you. Now, within organizations, the people who run the businesses or teams or whatever often carry that with them. So they often, unless they've got MBAs coming out their ears, have a pretty narrow view of marketing as well. So it really becomes about what you'll read lots about if you use social media like LinkedIn, etc. People want leads. They want what they perceive to be the commercial elements of marketing, and they want that done very quickly. And there are lots of people who are going to put their hand up and say, I can do that because it's not tactical, but relatively tactical. So you get into a vortex of kind of speed, but that vortex is often a vicious circle. Whereas if you take the broader view, of marketing and understand the basics that need to be aligned in there and understand what your marketplace is about. You understand your customer, their personas, how they behave. You understand what your product's for, what its value proposition is, what its USPs are. If you're taking it to market with all these things in play, that's a more complicated thing to do, obviously. It's a more complex thing to achieve as a marketing team, but once you get to the end level, it becomes easier. So it's kind of inversely related to some degree. But a lot of people don't want to go through or don't understand that level at the beginning that you need to go through to make things simple. And if our goal, as I've said before, is to make things simple, you have to understand there are hard yards in that. There are lots of famous quotes, depending on where in the world you're from, about, I wrote you a long letter. If I had more time, I would have written you a short one. I've heard German people say it was Goethe. I've heard English people say it was George Bernard Shaw. US people saying it was Edgar Allan Poe. It kind of depends where you. The reason it works and the reason people that borrow it is because it makes sense. So I think it's because sometimes people want to take short circuits. They want to take shortcuts. But a shortcut without risks would just be called the way, right? And the reason it's not the way is because it doesn't do that. So what you're seeing now, I think, and we've got a whole group of people around the world coming to terms with the idea that you can't do things as quickly as we would like. You can't just go out and grab and meet demand and turn that into commerciality, which is sustainable and long term. I always talk about in marketing, it's got like a swing of the pendulum from fast kind of meeting demand right through to kind of longer term brand programs, if you like, which last many years and take a lot of investment. I think we've seen one swing of the pendulum to the fast side, and now we're seeing one back to the other side. The reality for me is that we'd like to see something that sits in the middle, where there's balance and equilibrium across the marketing departments and across teams within marketing, so that they're able to work together to understand that these are actually parts of the same process. And if you can get them working together a little bit better, if you can still have metrics and they're not easy to get, but you can have brand campaigns with good metrics, you can have performance campaigns with good brand aspects. If we can start to dovetail these different components together, we'll see a lot better results, I think, moving forward. So balance is more important than speed, I would say. And too often we're guilty of aiming for the fastest things. We get briefs at Velocity, the agency, which says, you know, um, I need this now, I need it tomorrow. But the sort of act slow, think slow, act fast. It's not in the it's not in that mindset of low hanging fruit, get out there, do things quickly.
The opposite of Daniel Kahneman. Think slow, act or think slow, act fast. I forget how the name of his book.
Thinking fast and slow, Daniel Kahneman. He means that there are some things that you rely on your kind of system one basis, which means you use your intuition, and there are other things where you go more analytical stats where you have to really think about it. That's a problem in marketing in itself. System one is dominant. System one is very dominant. So we think on our gut and our institution, and that's intuition, which is why we sometimes end up taking the quick routes. Whereas actually, if you think a little bit harder, but the reality of what I said earlier about the positioning and understanding the broader aspects of marketing, that's really taking more time to sharpen the axe before you sort of chop down the trees. Uh, that is a better outcome, really, in the end, I think. And people, I think, we're starting to get back to that idea where good things come to those who wait a little bit. Now, I'm not saying being incredibly slow. One of the, that like books like The Lean Startup, for example, they have a lot of experimentation in them. But to me, that's really a part of the planning process. That if you set out to just see what happens, you will always succeed, right? So if you run a campaign quickly, get it live, let's see what happens. Well, you will see what happens. You cannot fail to see what happens. But is what happens useful? Is it guided? Is it directed? So, part of planning is experimentation. Sometimes people think they're two different things in marketing. Just get things live, get it going, see what happens. Yeah, but make sure you know why you're doing it, what you expect to see, what you're going to analyze, what the result's going to be, and that's part of good planning for me. So yeah, I'd like to see more. Yeah, less haste, if you like.
I love that. Well, Neil, you've shared a lot on marketing. I have one more kind of topic or thought within marketing before we kind of get to the deeper life conversations. But I was reading a recent, or maybe not recent, but a couple months ago, you guys were kind of doing a live kind of showing this testing of your narrative premise, which is that building a community around your content and your brand reliably generates revenue. That really kind of piggybacks off this long term, because it's impossible to build a community in a minute, in a day, in a week, right? It takes a long term, but then you can get more reliable. Can you just kind of share more on that premise or more on that thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jordan. I mean, I think, the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. What's a sustainable practice? What's a long-term thing that comes around? What people actually want is the value of your brand to stand for something. So when people come and knock on your door or ask you a question, they have an idea of what they expect. They have an idea of what you stand for. They have an idea of your value proposition. But obviously that is a sustainable long-term practice. And to achieve that type of outcome, you have to understand that you're going to commit to something. You have to plan for it properly, like you say. And then you have to commit to it for a long, long period of time. One of the things about marketers, again, it gets back to the same premise, is we get bored of things so much more quickly than our audience does. After 6 months, we think this message that we've been going out with and going to market has become incredibly dull. Everybody's heard it. But that's not the case. We've just spent hours going around tables and around ourselves sharing it. We're bored with it. The market is actually being slowly introduced to it. Now, I don't believe in any of the, like 7 things. If you see something 7 times, then that means that you're going to take it in. I don't think any of that's true. I mean, I think that's been made up by advertising people back in the day. But there's a grain of credibility in the sense that, you have to be exposed to things for a period of time. So consistency, commitment, lots of words that begin with C, really are things that, that marketers should stick with. And one of the problems that we have, obviously, is the organizations in which we work with are in a hurry. They want to do things quickly. So there is always that balance between what we want to achieve longer term and what we want to actually, what people pay us for sometimes. And it's a tough one. But a community, by definition, as you said, grows up over a period of time in response to long-term behaviors, consistency, good creative, if we're talking marketing terms, strength of message, deliverables and behavior. Even that goes across a whole organization in terms of, how you answer the phone sometimes in your customer services department and so forth. So that to me is very valid. What we need to learn to do to make that work, to deal with the short-termism, which often comes at us from other areas, is how do we show milestone measurements and be better at metrics which show that we're achieving that goal. One of the things we've tried to do at Velocity is look at more kind of metrics that relate to, not necessarily we've made a whole bunch of commerciality, but we're showing that we're getting in that right direction. After 6 months or 3 months, you can see that the goal for the longer term community building, etc., is working. Because the value of something like that, a group of people who believe in your message, believe in what you do, no matter what type of business you're in, you can't really put a price on that. But it's difficult sometimes to get there and to keep people aligned to the message. But that commitment is such a wonderful thing, and there's a consistency and commitment, I think, is two things. The Capaldi book, I think, that goes into that is really awesome. If you say things consistently, people believe them. If you're committed to that and say things publicly about why you're going to keep doing it, then it'll take you a long way.
I love that, Neil. And a thought that came to my mind with just AI, and especially in the SaaS world, is the moat that a community is. It's very hard to copy a community. I mean, it's kind of impossible, like, to take it over with AI or whatever. But nowadays, there's people creating CRMs in 15 minutes with AI. So it's like, if you don't have that community, if you don't have those beliefs and all the things at which you're talking about, you're easily able to be just, kind of taken Like you can have a competitor kind of come in easily without the community or some of these long term things.
One of my ex-colleagues who I talk to all the time, he has a kind of better than AI mantra. That's how he puts stuff. Everything he does, and he's a very commercial, entrepreneurial person, and he's big into AI. He wants to use it. So his value prop or our value prop has to be one step better than that. We were going to have to learn to use it. It's not something that we can't we can ignore. It's not something we can't work with. In 50 years, it's going to pervade all aspects of our lives in ways that we can't possibly even fathom right now. Whatever we're predicting probably won't be what happens, but it will be there. But some of these intangible things, if you like, I mean, getting back to metaphysical worlds, really, it can't do that. Not at the moment, as I understand it, anyway. Can it galvanize people in the same way? Can it create conversations between real humans? Yeah, it can support the infrastructural areas that does that, and it does that quite quickly. But the old marketing phrase, build it and they will come. Well, that what you've described as building something, they're not necessarily going to come without the other elements to it. And again, how many marketing projects to build community or to achieve something like that have been abandoned so quickly that they actually never really had any opportunity of working because the idea of when they would come to an ROI was so out of kilter with the reality, right? I look at the Velocity, our blog. I remember when I first started there, Doug Kessler, one of the founders, some people might know him. I said to him, "How are you getting on with the blog?" And he said, "Oh, I might give it up. It doesn't appear to be getting any traction." And then 2 years later, we were kind of looking at the analytics, and it had taken off in a dramatic way. And I reminded him of it, and he kind of laughed and said, "Just imagine we get like 20,000 visits a month, this stuff." And we tried to work out, or he did. I mean, apart from his obvious skill as a a great marketer and a wonderful copywriter, and his ability to put things in the terms that kind of his market understands. Back to the basics of marketing, right? But it was consistency. He just kept doing these things well over a period of time, and he stuck to the subject matter, and the other people who worked on the blog as well. For such a substantial period of time, the community came with it. And the community came with comments, it came with shares, it came with people agreeing, it came with new business leads regularly. But that wasn't there was a point in that time where even he and other people thought, is this worth it? The hockey stick moment might come, but you're never sure when it's going to
Oh,
happen. Like a lot of
oh.
people, you included, me included, we use LinkedIn. You sometimes things take off, sometimes they don't. It's difficult to work it out. So we can't be so precise and impatient. We have to be committed to a cause and an idea and a message and a process. And if we do that for a long period of time.
I'm going to digress before we get to life because you created another thought in my head. So just talking about that writing, something that I've been a huge fan of Velocity Partner blog for a while. I've consumed it, but I've noticed that it's almost like would you classify your company as a writing culture? Like it seems that through those blogs you have developed some of these premises or these ideologies, so it's almost like you've gotten value through the creation of the writing because you're developing your thoughts on where the market's going, coronavirus, whatever it was, that then you just keep a stronger premise. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever put it that way, that like we're a writing culture, we all write? Because I've seen that at Notion, all these different companies who have kind of like a writer first model.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been the method of articulation for the business, and that comes from its founding culture, right? So the people who founded the business originally, but were really good at that, and we've carried it on. And again, that's what people want, but it's just a way of articulation for us. Other people will come and do it different ways. They'll shoot video all the time. They'll run podcasts. Their message comes in that way. For us, it's again that's our brand. That's our community. That's what we've been committed to. The other things we need to do, we need to be involved in these things. But writing is our method of doing that. And the people who enjoy still in numbers that format and that way of learning, I think they know they're going to come and get a good experience. And what we have to do is keep evolving that to be like our world is B2B marketing, and that's consistent. But the impacts and environment that B2B marketing is shifts every other day. So that one subject matter is there's a story to be told in hundreds of ways every year. And what our job, I think, is to work out what's most relevant to the people that are both our stakeholders, who come to learn a bit about marketing, or in agencies like us, or freelancers, but also our marketplace, that to find things that are commercial. I think there's a shift these days from being a little bit more like people I think used to like a kind of story and a bit of kind of broad thought leadership. I think there is a shift now with AI and tools to be a little bit more pragmatic. Don't just explain to me how it is. Explain to me what we can do about it. And I think that's a very in a world of so many tools and metrics and data and all these different things, people need more help, I think, in understanding it and charting the way through that because it's bamboozling, like we all know. So anyone that comes along and sort of offers a path that you can follow are always going to be doing pretty well and will find an audience, I think. And that's shifted a bit recently. I think setting about being strategic is less is matters, but showing people a path to achieve or do something or work in the world that we're in, particularly with so much disruption, like you say, so many tools, AI, etc. It's always going to be popular. So that's how you keep it fresh. Understand what the market wants, I think, but also what are the forces disrupting and changing it. And if you can get the confluence of these two things right, you've always got it.
I like that point that you kind of highlight a little bit before that of that the writing was your company's medium, but for others, I struggle with that because I want to like naturally push back. I just feel that I've read a quote that writing is thinking. So my podcast, for example, clearly I'm just talking, but if I do a solo episode, it will be based off an essay I write. So then I ensure that I've gotten all these points. And I just find writing to be so critical that if you don't put it on paper, like Jeff Bezos has his huge manual writing and before every meeting, people read through that and then they talk. Like, it seems that a writing culture just speeds things up. You're able to pivot quicker because you're constantly addressing it in writing, which is thinking.
If you're in any kind of change management process or program or marketing campaign, whatever, if you don't, I can go on calls and articulate kind of what I think to people, but eventually they'll forget it or it will dissipate or they'll come back next week. Writing is an opportunity for feedback in a way that's I think is a little bit more structured. And it forces you to again, go back to the basics of marketing that we started talking about. It forces you to structure. It forces you to logic. Not always, it's hard, but it forces you to pattern. And then when you present that to somebody, they then have something to work on top. So I don't think writing things down will ever in a million years go out of fashion because that is thinking that fast and slow. You and I are talking. We're probably thinking quite quickly right now between us, right? But if we were to write back, if you asked me to go away and summarize the things I told you in 1,000 words, I'd take a day and a half perhaps to do and get that right to do it justice for you, and that's different, and that's it. So when you want to transition from thinking fast to thinking slow, I think writing things down definitely always will help. But a lot of, like I watch my nephews and so on, they communicate with each other through, voice messages all the time. And to me, there's a fine line between having a conversation and what they're doing, but that's the way they choose to do it. It gives them a quick way to communicate, but a breathing space at the same time. Awesome. I don't think I'll do that very often. That's my way, a little different. But yeah, I just love it. It's good. And in 20 years, it's all going to be very different. Everything evolves. The marketing world that we're in, the structures that we deliver, the language that we're in. You see people, social media now, don't use, capital letters. People turn nouns into verbs all the time. I love it. I think it's great. It's an absolute evolution of language that is unstoppable. And I'm not sure it will all work. I mean, I still might. I think the capital letters were invented in like 800, the year 800, in some German abbey or something. It's a long time for it to go out of fashion and be killed off. But you never know.
If I could hold a little bit of your curiosity, Neil, and your openness at your kind of point in your career, I find too many people that kind of hit that point don't look to the youth the way you're kind of talking about it. It just seems that you're just like open and you're willing to see what reality Has to say versus like forcing reality to say what you want it to
Yeah,
say.
when you and I first spoke, Jordan, like we said, like we're kind of at different junctures in our worlds. You're kind of in our world, and I've been around the block a little bit longer. But I think if you can get that right, it's not a case of wiser people with experience teaching younger people with eagerness. It's not like that at all. It's really got to be a circle of learning because the whole breadth of the world is changing via the people that are growing up. So it's me that's more likely, the phrase dinosaur people use, you don't want to do that, and it's easy to do it. I once worked for a company that, worked at a company. It was the building. It was clearly in the 1970s, going back a while now, the cutting edge of kind of production technology, etc. They'd obviously decided that they're not going to let a salesperson call. 30 years later, fast forward, it was like a museum to production. They hadn't gone with the times. And that's exactly what you can never afford to do. You have to take it in and you have to be able to kind of learn from people as they come. And if you can't do that, you also just start to dislike your job. I mean, in the world we're in, it's like we said, basics of marketing, research, understand what things are changing, how they're evolving. If you can't go with that, you'll start to dislike it. You're like an immovable line as the world goes past you. You just can't operate like that. And it's not about, in the same, you talk about the advertising industry is always focused on younger people, etc., to sell to them. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, the sharing of ideas. It's very, very kind of fun and important to make sure that happens.
That's well said, Neil. Well, I have definitely got my marketing fix. I think I'm ready to head into the life question, which is probably bigger than any of the conversation we've had today. So, Neil, what is the purpose of life? What should we be aiming for? And obviously, this is your answer. So I know that not everybody will have the same answer, but what do you think the goal or progress of life is?
I think I read the book Orbital by a woman called Samantha Harvey, and it's kind of like about a group of astronauts, cosmonauts orbiting the Earth, and they're looking down on it from above, and you get a feeling that they're almost experiencing, looking at this wonderful kind of sight, how insignificant and small to some degree their life is, right? And it's very, very, it's really interesting and it's really well written. I'd recommend anyone to read it. But that's kind of it for me. That we are here to play a role, I think, in paying things forward and always trying to think about how we can make something slightly better. Whether it's in life or in marketing, it doesn't really faze me, to be honest. We are not the big dominant players in life or the universe that we often think that we are. We're big in our own universes. We're all the sun for our own lives. Everything orbits around us. But I think we have to understand that what we're really trying here to do is try and make things a little bit better. I love the idea of paying things forwards. And I think if we do that in our lives with our friends, with our family, with just the human beings around us, you're always adding some value. You're always thinking about what you can contribute. And if you're adding value, you're going to get a lot out of that because it's not necessarily an altruistic world, but what goes around comes around. So if you've got time for people, they tend to have time back for you. If you're generous with things, people tend to give things back to you. You don't always win, and you encounter some difficult people along the way with zero-sum games, etc. But generally, putting some time and effort into things, again, whether it be marketing or life, generally will ultimately deliver a return. So I just think it's important to think about what you can contribute to the world. And by the way, we can't all, and one of the things this book is about, you can't all save the world, or you can't do that individually. We can't all make some of the impacts that some of the most famous and most significant historical figures have had. But collectively, if we all take the right approaches, take small steps and do the right things, that's more power, more value than any one person or any group of people could ever do. And that I think is a hard thing to understand in life because we do all feel sometimes a little bit small and insignificant. But our power, the human power, has always been in its ability to do things en masse in numbers. And when that's put for the power of good, then it's a wonderful thing. I have a kind of theory in life. It's made up, so it should be taken with the spirit that it's 70% of people, no matter who they are, if they're if they're American, Scottish, from the Bahamas, are pretty good, decent people. 10% are not very nice. That's kind of the ratio. Maybe that's and 20% are awesome. And as long as we keep the 10% kind of in the minority, we're in a pretty good society. And if we always have a look around to make sure that that's not the case, and that's most people are generous in spirit in my book. We all talk about at work a lot to assume a positive intent on other people, and sometimes you get a bit paranoid, or you think like the world's kind of out to get me today. But if you look around, most people are out actively doing quite nice, active things, sharing stuff with each other, helping each other out. More people are like that. There seems to be a human condition, I think, that my dad used to own a bar when I was growing up, and I started working in it when I was 18. And most people in bars, like anywhere else, probably conform to the 70-20-10 theory. So most of them are lovely, but one person would be really difficult to me in a day. And that was always what I would go to bed and remember, the difficult customer, the one that caused me all the problems. I don't know why I did that, because the other 99.9% were, why didn't I remember that? So I just think in life it's to remember that, we are relatively insignificant, but if we all behave in good ways together collectively, we become a big majority, and a big majority do incredible things, and it can do incredible things over time. And so that means we've all got a duty, if you like, to be good to each other, pay things forward. And we've got a right to some degree to expect that in return. And the more that goes around, the more it comes around. And I think that's how people are in life mostly. And we should correct ourselves whenever we feel perhaps that it's not quite going that way.
I love that. There's a it's I don't remember the first name, but it's like Hanlon's razor. It's like this mental model that essentially assume ignorance and not malicious. Like if someone cuts you off in traffic, it's usually ignorance. Then that person was devising to cut you off because of the timing and all that to go into it is very hard for someone to like actively cut you off. It's just them being ignorant. So that's been something I've moved through life being like, oh, they said this to me. It's like, no, it's just ignorance. They didn't know I had my family member in the hospital. It's not that they were trying to be mean. Like, and that's been very helpful. So it's so much similar to what you're saying. I think honestly, Neil, as you're talking, I do feel that there's some interconnectedness in this thought of the world doesn't revolve around me, which means that if this person cuts me off, maybe they have something going on in their life and it's not just about my life. And it's almost this like interconnected. I've recently read this book, 40,000 Weeks, and it talks about productivity of like essentially you realize you're going to do nothing in your life. Like essentially he pivots at that premise early to then say, so go and do the few things that you can do and do them well. And that I think is it's this like oxymoron or irony of like, if I accept my very finiteness, I then become infinite. By accepting my smallness to then become a group of people fighting for this right or that, then I become bigger and I'm actually able to be meaningful. But by trying to be meaningful and thinking I'm some big thing in this world, I'm instantly then nothing. It's like this kind of...
Exactly. Have you ever heard of Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon? The
Yes,
little boy
yes.
with a stuffed tiger. So it's Hobbes, who's the tiger, says to Calvin, like, what did you wish for in this thing? And he goes, I wished for world domination, a private army, and $1 million. And what did you get? Nothing. And he said, okay, what did you wish for? And he said, a tuna fish sandwich. And he's holding it, eating it. So, like big plans, big ambitions, but no result. The other one, set your definitions, kind of set. Because as I say, it's nothing wrong with being ambitious and living your life to the absolute full and being the best you possibly can. And if that takes you to wonderful, far off places to make you so windswept and interesting, tremendous, you should absolutely do that. But, I think success in life is, again, back to the basics. Think about life more simply sometimes. I mean, what's true in life is true in business, it's true in marketing. Bad guys will win sometimes. They will, of course they will, but not regularly. The world wouldn't be in the place it is if that was the case. You know. So yeah, I think we can be optimistic in life still. I still, an optimist to a degree.
Yeah, opt for optimism. I like that. All right, Neil, final question. What would your life be like without football, soccer? I know you're a big fan. What does that bring to your life? What does that do for you?
Some of the best friends I have in the world, I met talking about soccer, football, depending on where you get that debate. And this is slightly misunderstood. My partner, Claire, she sort of says, "Well, you boys talk about football all the time." Yeah. But what it really is it's like a lingua franca, right? So you meet a bunch of people in a room, and you start talking to them about, you know, Liverpool or Newcastle United, or more famously Dundee United in my case. And then the next thing you say is, "Yeah, well, I've never been to Liverpool." And then 2 minutes later, you have a conversation about Liverpool. You've actually moved on from football and soccer. So what it taught me was how to kind of work in a community, be part of a team, be an individual within that to some degree. But it also gave me a life kind of code and language that I can apply to lots of different situations. And that's often what the beauty of it is. It's like you're able to speak to family members, friends about something that you all know, and which I do love. Don't get me wrong, but it gives you a chance to get to know somebody for 2 minutes, and if you get a chance to know somebody for 2 minutes, you might find something else that you know about them. So small talk can turn into deeper talk, and when deeper talk comes, you become friends. So the people I met talking about football, that's not what we talk about. Well, we talk about it all the time, but we also talk about life, love, money,
Hmm.
desires, you name it, everything. So I would say I owe it quite a lot in that respect. It's been fun to play, fun to do. And I also bring a kind of sports mentality to work as well. At a marketing agency, you're competing with people. You're like same in any business. You celebrate your wins. You celebrate the team. You understand that you have a role to play. People rely on you, to you to do your job properly. And when you win and things go well, it's wonderful, to celebrate that. But sometimes you're going to lose as well, and you have to learn to lose, because you can't win all. And we've lost hard, believe me, sometimes, very hard. But then you think, I'm used to this. I've learned
Hmm.
this when I was younger, and as a team, as a unit, we'll come back. And yeah, so I owe it a lot in terms of, like a lot of people with sport. It gives them a kind of code for life, I think, and it gives them an understanding of how to behave in certain ways. It gives you a good social understanding, and if you're able to apply that, the best parts of that, into the world, then it's good. So I don't think it matters if it's soccer or American football, or rugby or ice hockey or hockey, as they might just call it, basketball. That all these things come with these types of things, and it's fun to be tribal sometimes as well. If you don't, it's nice to be kind of all part. I live in England, but obviously, if you know accents, I'm from Scotland. When I go back and we're all watching Scotland play, I mean, it's wonderful to be back and everyone on the same teams supporting the same things. It reminds you you're part of this big community of tremendous people, because the next day you're back feeling that insignificance and loneliness potentially. But yeah, I think it's a metaphor for life, Jordan. I would say
In
in many.
what better way with you, Neil, to end on a metaphor? I think this is the end of the podcast. This was amazing. Wow, I learned so much. Thank you, Neil, for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Talk to you soon.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.